Welcome to the Digital Diversity Podcast, a show all about queer games and the fantastic folks that make them. I'm Kaiju, pronouns they, them. I'm a games journalist, a game streamer. You can find me on Twitter at NBKaiju. I am a demisexual biromantic. I'm here with my co-host, Maddie.
Hi, I'm Maddie. I use she, her pronouns. You can find me on Twitter at timepatches and pretty much everywhere else on the internet. I make queer visual novels, and I'm a panromantic asexual person. Yay!
And our special guest for today's special episode is Alison, aka Drazillion. Please introduce yourself.
I am Alison, pronouns she, her. I am a demi-pansexual, demi-panromantic, and I am a general jack of all trades in regards to game development. I do art, I do writing, I do programming sometimes. If I really need to, I'll do audio, but please don't ask me to. And yeah, I do a lot of game jams, and which is why I am here.
Haha!
For those who haven't guessed already, today's episode is all about game jams, what they are, how they work, and how you can get into them and make something. It's nice to have some more demi rep in the chat. Let's get on. And the reason that we brought Alison in today for this particular episode is because Alison is kind of the Australian queen of game jams.
Definitely.
So whenever I talk to Alison, she's always talking about how many game jams she's in at the time, how many are coming up. So right now, Alison, how many game jams are you currently part of or getting ready for?
I'm currently not doing anything, but I'm working with some people to finish a NaNoRenO game, and also I am thinking of doing the Other Ships Jam, which is coming up next month.
What's the Other Ships Jam?
It's a tabletop RPG jam where you make games about relationships that are like your heteronormative relationships. It's done by my friend Meta Paradox, also known as Olivia. So this is the second Other Ships Jam. Last year I made The Bonds That Tie Us, which is a GM-less tabletop RPG about characters and their relationships with each other, how they grow and how they fall apart. I made this because, you know, a big thing about being demi is that I have an interesting connection between, like, being pan and also not really caring that much about, like, sexual and romantic relationships as, you know, someone who is allo and amato. And because, you know, there are games where relationships matter, but they're always weighted towards romantic ones or sexual ones, or like, you know, assuming that all sexual relationships are also romantic or will end up being romantic. And for me, The Bonds That Tie Us is like making all of these bonds equal in like mechanical wise.
Nice. I think a lot of ace people can relate to that.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start from the beginning. Alison, let's start you off. What is a game jam?
A game jam is, well, technically a competition in which people make games within a certain time limit. I say competition because a lot of them started as competitions, like Ludum Dare is the biggest game jam that happens like 4 times a year. But a lot of the game jams that I do aren't competitions, they're more ways to build community and all hype each other up to make games. And like, you know, because it's really inspiring to see, you know, everyone else's progress and to be like, oh yeah, we all made these games by this deadline is just really nice.
It's a competition where your only actual competition is yourself not completing the game in time.
Yeah. I guess a similar thing that's not game related would be NaNoRenO. A lot of writers do that where they try and write a novel in a month. So it's a similar kind of like self-challenge while also being able to use the community that everyone's doing it at the same time. So there's a lot of support.
Yeah, there's obviously game jams that are competitions where you can win, and like usually with categories like, oh yeah, best narrative or best audio or best writing. But a lot of queer game jams tend to not do that because they're more, you know, because we have we're not really into being competitive with each other. We're so starved for representation in the media that we just want to make more, and that's enough reward.
Yeah, it's a bit of an excuse to try and flood the market with a bit of representation to try and get noticed, I guess.
And because, like, especially because a lot of game jams are on itch.io, itch.io, and because itch allows you to make game jam pages, you can also, like, hear about a game jam and then go to that game jam page, and you have all of the entries for that jam in one location.
Yeah, so if people haven't actually been and seen, if you go to itch.io /jams, it actually gives you a calendar of all the game jams that are happening over the month, over the future year and stuff like that. And holy crap, there are a lot.
It's very much open source. If you want to make a game jam, you can just literally write one up. There it is. It's out there now.
You literally, you go in, you press host a jam, you write down what you want to say, and you give people the link. They make something, they upload it, and they all get linked to that game jam. You still sell it if you want to sell it. You still retain all your ownership, but you become kind of part of that anthology.
Game jams are very much just like an alternative method for people to find your games. Like, I've seen a lot of people be like, oh, can I still update my game after the jam? And a lot of questions like that, because, like, obviously some rated jams, they don't want you to, because they want your game to actually reflect what score you got and vice versa. But most jams are fine with it because, you know, they don't have ownership over your game in any way.
And a lot of the time people take what they've done in game jams and they go and do something bigger with it. So they go and write a bigger story, they go write a bigger game, or they try and retell that game in a way that works. So just having a look at the game jam page, there are more than 80,000 games that have been created for jams hosted on itch.
Wow. That's incredible.
I mean, holy hell. And that's the definition of game is as varied as the definition of game as we discuss it is. Like, this can be something as simple as something you make in Twine, a very simple thing, or something incredibly complicated. And there are some really big ones. So, like, there's Global Game Jam that happens, and that's a huge one. But then there are also, like, really small ones. There are only a handful of people. And the queer ones, which are the ones that I think we love the most, are the ones where we can get the representation that we just don't see anywhere else. And I know that I've featured hell of a lot of games that have come through game jams on the channel before.
Definitely. And I think we've all found that game jams are a great way to encourage newer devs to just kind of try something out, because there's a big community or a small community, but there's a lot of people doing it at the same time and they're all willing to help you. So it's a great way to kind of dip your toe in. I know certainly that's how I started in game development, is through game jams.
I do want to point out that there are even some game jams where the goal is not to make a game. So you might have, like, submit an empty zip file or something like that.
I saw that. It's like not a game jam or something like that, where people are given like, okay, you cannot make something in 2 weeks because you've just been going full ball the entire time. And it's like, that's impressive. This is actually a really good chance to talk about our experiences doing it now. We'll start with me, because I've made the smallest and most insignificant thing of the lot, I think I could probably say happily. So I have done the NB Jam, or the non-binary game jam. I did that last year. I made something in Bitsy. It was quick. It was just my first attempt at actually finishing a game, and it was a really lovely experience. And that's the one that I made. It was called They Live Here Now, and that's just a slice of life, I guess, about a non-binary person who got themselves shot into space in a rocket because they didn't want to have to deal with people anymore. Maddie, your experiences?
Yeah, I just want to say that I loved that little game. It was such a nice little experience, and I'm so glad that you made it. And I can't wait to see what else you make in the future, hopefully.
It's had surprisingly good traction for something that took me 3 hours to make.
Sometimes that's games.
just all it has to be, you know? Yeah, as far as my game jam experience goes, I've participated in 2 actually, which most people don't know because I deleted the first game.
No.
But the first game I ever created was for Sunofest in 2017, which feels
Summer
like
Novel Festival, right?
yes, I believe that is what it is short for. It feels like 7 billion years ago, so I don't remember a lot. But I definitely remember the game jam being so encouraging for me to just go for it, make a little experience, and like see if I can do it. And I could do it, so I kept doing it. So I made a little tiny game. It's called Nanairo, which means 7 colors in Japanese, because I'm big friggin' weeaboo.
Weebs.
Weeb alert. And I could only draw horses at the time, so the 2 characters were unicorns because reasons. And it was just kind of an excuse to do everything. I did everything myself except for the music, which I got my friend to do for me. But like I drew all the backgrounds, I did all the UI, I wrote all the things. And it was a great way for me as a producer and a game dev to kind of dip my toe into the fields of everything that goes into a visual novel and kind of get a handle on all of that. I think it really influenced my ability to direct people later on in bigger projects where there was people doing things that I wasn't doing. I kind of got a handle on what the actual process of all of that is. So that was really helpful. And then the second game jam that I was involved in was Maximum Monster Month in 2018. And that's when I made When Asta Falls, which we've talked about on this podcast.
That's also when I first met Maddie. Like we'd never talked, but I was like, oh, that is a game. Because my team wanted you to win, but we won instead, and we were angry about it.
Oh, that's so sweet. I'm glad you guys won. That was like a whole no, that was fine.
Maddie, When Asta Falls brought a lot of people together. It brought a lot of recognition, and I hope you're proud of it.
Yeah, I am really proud of it. It still feels weird because I think it's tricky when you make something in a short period of time to kind of give it its due in your head, because you're like, oh no, it only took me a month, and it's like, no, well, yeah, I still worked really hard on it, and it's still like is an experience that people have now had, and like all of that. But it's tricky to kind of reconcile those 2 things in your head.
All right, Alison, the list. Give us the list of your experiences.
Oh god, do you actually want me to like say every one of them?
No, you don't have to say every single one. Tell us where you started and tell us some notables for you.
Okay, so the first one I did was Rainbow Jam 2017. This one is notable because I did it during my final year at university, during my mid-semester break.
Wow.
Don't do this, kids.
And it didn't kill you?
No, because I scoped it really well. Because
nice.
My game All That I Touch is basically a game where you're in a room that matched what my room was like at the time, just really low poly. And basically you shoot the colors of whatever flag at the room, and then it changes the colors of the objects. And that's all it is. It took me like, I want to say 5 days or something like that. Because I only joined halfway through the jam because it was a 2-week jam.
Nice.
The second jam I did was during the final weeks of my degree. Right,
I'm noticing a pattern.
Don't worry, it gets better because I leave university. I don't have to have this conflict anymore. Which was Yuri Jam, Who Knows Where They're Going, which is a twine that I made in about 3 weeks, I want to say, because I also joined halfway through because I was like, I have my game that I'm making for school. I shouldn't join this, and I did it anyway. Don't be like me.
Again, I'm noticing a theme.
Yeah, Who Knows Where They're Going is a twine game. It's one that's still popular, even if because, I made it in such a short amount of time, I feel I could have expanded on it. And I definitely want to, do another game with these characters again.
It's really sweet. I've streamed it, and it is lovely.
It's dear to my heart because it is one of the games that I draw the most personal experiences on. It is basically a date with myself, because the 2 characters represent different parts of my identity. The character Vera, she represents my fatness and the fact that despite being Chinese, like I am, and living in a family that is all Chinese, I am living in an English-speaking country, and I have grown up, with white mannerisms and that kind of stuff. And Rel represents all of the pressures of being Chinese. In the game, she talks about how she's at law school and she's not really sure that's what she wanted, and yeah, she's definitely not. She doesn't have the best relationship with her family, and she's also at the start of the game she identifies as bisexual, and by the end, if you follow her side of things, she Vera talks about her sexuality a bit more, and questions if she would identify as demi as well. And that was important to me because my thesis at university was talking about queer representation, and a part of that was looking at all the ways that visual novels portray ace characters, and all of the main, like, not AAA because visual novels are much more niche than that generally, but all of the like Hanako games kind of deal how they portray ace characters, and it's always either, oh, this character seems to be ace from what they're saying, and how their relationship with romance and stuff, but the word asexual is never said, or the word asexual is said and it is not explained what it is. And I was just frustrated with the fact that neither side was helpful to people that are ace or on the ace spectrum, or aro on the Aries spectrum, and wanting to be like, oh, there are other people like me and this is a label that I can use.
Or people that are questioning and kind of need more info but don't know where to look.
Because, Virginia from Magical Diary, she seems to be ace by the way that, she talks about romance and sexuality in that game, and the fact that her route ends with her being like, oh, can we hug? And at the time, because, it's a very early on visual novel, and at the time I was, reading it, I was very early on in being, being queer, and I was just annoyed that, she was one of two female routes in a game with a female main character, and, it didn't seem like it was as, on the same level as the other ones to be, because obviously I didn't know about asexuality at the time either. And in hindsight, it all makes sense, but, if they had said the word, then I wouldn't have been so quote-unquote disappointed with how that went.
It's definitely something we've brought up in previous episodes, is this how do you do representation well when you've got the two extremes. One side is being intentionally vague but having the hints there, and on the other side having the characters blurted out openly, where the examples that always come up are BioWare games usually, because there's always one queer character, generally one trans character, who comes out very broad, very openly straight from the bat and says, hi, I'm trans, here's my dead name. I'm not going down that road again. but that's one extreme, and the other side is, oh, hey, can you pass me my binder and see if someone gets the reference. So it's a tough one to go, especially if you don't have the language, because it's possible that character, the person who was writing those characters, didn't have the right words for it either.
Yeah, definitely.
Honestly, I would love to see more games where there are where some of the romance routes end up with, can we just hug? And I'd be fine with that. Any other notables up until recently? What was the most recent game jam you're part of?
The most recent one was NaNoWriMo, where we made When the War Was Home. I say we because I do a lot of visual novels with Watercrest Studios, which is this 30 plus member freeware studio that has members from across the world. A lot of them, a decent amount of the members are queer, but also it's such a big studio that I couldn't say that the whole studio was queer by
A good chunk of them were.
Yeah. And, it's really fun to make games with them because I do a lot of solo games, and sometimes it is nice to know that someone else is doing a good chunk of the work. And so it's less stressful, but also at the same time, having more people also means that the scope can be larger, and that can also be a problem at times.
That's actually a good segue into the next point is how do you scope a game that you can only make in a month?
Always make a smaller game than the thing that you think you're going to be able to make. Because back in 2018, the first game I made that year was Acetone, which was my first visual novel. I had opened Ren'Py a month earlier to play around with and thought, okay, I can make something with this, but also I didn't want to be too ambitious. So it is a kinetic visual novel, no choices, so it's just a linear story. And, that was how I was able to make it in a month. Just because it was kinetic didn't mean that it didn't take some time, because I was doing all of the writing and all of the code and all of the art, so I still had a lot going for me. But because I didn't have to think about choices or like how to code those choices, I could just, and like how choices matter and stuff, I could just like write out the script, do the art, code it all together, and just have a finished visual novel in a month. Actually, I think I made it in 3 weeks, because at the end of that month, I did Global Game Jam, and I wanted the game to be done before Global Game Jam, so I wasn't going to be stressed the whole week.
That is very impressive. And from Acetone, you ended up doing a bit of a sequel for that as well, didn't you?
Technically, it's meant to be acetylene, because that is how the chemical stuff is, but I call it acetylene just because it's similar to acetone and sequels. Because I knew I could make a visual novel in 3 weeks that was a kinetic visual novel. The next year I was like, okay, I'm adding choices and I'm making sure those choices matter. And so acetylene or acetylene was an interesting process, because I had to do much more planning because of the choices and making sure that all of the choices were like equal, so you weren't like, because it's a game where while there are bad endings, like the bad endings are like basically all your choices are choosing between two things, and I didn't want one of the endings to be worse than another, for example, or like, and there isn't one true ending. I was actually planning on maybe doing a true ending, but when I started writing it, it seemed like that wasn't a thing that I was going to do. So yeah, a lot of that was just, I was definitely like, the writing was harder in some ways, but also, I had a clear idea of what I wanted to do, so that was still fine. I did have more sprited characters in Acetylene, so obviously I'd do more art. And I got fancier with my coding, so there was that also. So like, because I knew I was capable, I knew what I was capable in 3 weeks, I could do all that extra stuff in the same amount of time, basically. I think Acetylene did take me a little longer, but I still got it done in the month.
So if you're scoping, the first time you do something, start very small, then gradually get bigger as you go along and as your skills grow with that particular thing.
I will talk about Who Knows Where They're Going again, because it was my first twine that I was doing out of university. So it is like, Who Knows Where They're Going was 3,600 words. So it is pretty tiny, which is also why it's kind of wild that people still really like it. But the quantity of words doesn't really impact how
it's how the story is told. It's not
Yeah.
how many words are there for telling the story.
That's definitely a good lesson, because I struggled with that with both of my jam games. I was like, but it's not long enough. That's not what it's about.
Yeah.
And the next year, in 2018, I wrote As Cold as the Grave, which is this 12,900 word game with like so many like branching stuff, and it is just like such a big game. I don't know how. Well, obviously, Who Knows Where They Were Going was made like halfway through the jam, and with As Cold as the Grave, I was using the full 2 months, but it's still so wild.
Pretty impressive. I'd actually like to know from both of you, what are the biggest lessons you've learned in making a game in a compressed time frame?
Me, it's kind of just what I just said. It's about doing it. It's not about it being perfect. It's about, meeting people, getting to know the community around you, and just freaking make the thing. Just do it. It'll be fine. Go for it. I would say go for it is probably like the shortest lesson.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because a lot of the games I make, they're made because I have an idea and I just want to make it and just have it out there in the world, and I don't really think about my jam games after the fact, and because I'm just moving on to the next thing, and look at all the games I've made. If I had really thought more, or was like, oh no, I need to make it perfect, I probably would not have like half of the games I have made.
And you have made quite a few games, so
yeah.
All right, so here's a question. What do you think makes for a good game jam? What elements do you think you need to make for a good game jam?
As in, like, if you're hosting a game jam?
Yep, if you're hosting it, or if you're part of one, what do you want to see? What makes you feel like you're ready to, like you want to make something, and what makes you feel less stressed to make the thing?
With queer game jams, there usually aren't many stipulations besides from, adhering to the kind of queerness that the game jam is about. Other game jams, like NaNoWriMo, which is all about, oh yeah, you have to make a visual novel and you can't make any assets before the month, or else, you're going against the spirit of the jam. So there are like, it depends firstly on, what kind of jam it is. If it is the queer focus, like non-binary jam, Yuri jam, then it's good to have clear like guidelines for what you're expecting and like out of the community, because obviously Yuri jam in particular has a history of attracting people to it because of its name, and some people might not think, oh yeah, this is a game jam for queer people by queer people. So you need to make sure that your boundaries are clear and what you're allowing, because obviously with any queer identity, just because characters are queer doesn't necessarily mean that it is a queer friendly experience. A Discord is always good, because with these game jams you're creating a community as well, and Discord is really good for fostering community, especially when you can just mute it if it's not you're up to speed.
I mean, I think they pretty much all have Discords now as well, just
Yeah.
as it's such an approachable method of communicating what's going on. And do you think there are any healthy attitudes that you should take into a game jam? So say you're going into a game jam for the first time. Should you go in with a certain frame of mind? Should you go in with certain expectations, both for the jam and for yourself?
It really depends on why you're doing a game jam, because there's not one set reason for why you would be doing a game jam, because some people do game jams to challenge themselves, because oh yeah, I've made, let's see what I can do in 48 hours, and that's what they want to do. And other people are making game jam games because of the sense of community and the fact that they want more representation in the world. Depending on like what you want to get out of it, that should shape your mindset. If you want more games out there with representation, then just go in and like, oh yeah, I'll just make a really gay game, and maybe that will turn out, maybe that it won't turn out, but you might as well try, right?
And why do you go into game jams?
Because I thrive under deadlines that aren't set by me, because if I set my own deadlines, I will just move them because no one else knows when the deadline is. So it really motivates me when I have a deadline set for me that I can just, make sure I can get everything done by that. And like, if I succeed, then I feel really good about myself, because hell yeah, I met a deadline. Here's the thing about game jams. You don't have to submit a game or really anything if you don't want to, because unless you're doing a game jam like Global Game Jam, where generally you will have to buy a ticket because some game jams are in person, you're not really losing anything because, it's just a method of submitting a game, and you can make games outside of a game jam. So, like, if you make half a game during a game jam and you don't feel like confident in submitting it, even if most game jams do allow you to submit demos and stuff, you can still continue on with that game. There's no rules stopping you from.
Yeah, you're not contractually obligated to submit a game. You're not forced to finish something. You're not forced to it. I mean, sometimes you just go into it because you want to share an environment that feels right. So I know I definitely wanted to make something for the NB Game Jam this year, but I wasn't in the right space to do it.
Yeah.
But I came up with an idea that I really want to use later on down the track, that I came up with after thinking of the theme and after going through it. It's like, you know what, this is something that I want to do, but I'm not going to stick myself on a time limit to do it when I'm in a bad headspace. I think Maddie was, are you still on board to help me make that happen at some point?
Oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah. Very keen.
What should people do if they're going into a game jam for the first time? So someone who wants to try and making a game but has never done one before, what should they do? They've seen a game jam and they've gone, I want to do this. Where do they go from there?
I think first off, you need to figure out if you're doing it solo or with a group, especially if you don't know anyone in the community. Do you reach out to other people and, like, because you can make friends if you go, oh yeah, I want to make a game. Who wants to do this? This is my skill set. And just, have fun with people. Or you can figure out, like, oh yeah, because this is my first one, I'll just do it alone. So I, am in control of all of the variables, and if it doesn't go well, then no one else is going to be disappointed. And from there, like, if you're doing it with the group, you have to, like, make sure you're communicating well with your group so everyone knows what is going on at all times. If you're working by yourself, you need to make sure that you have all the tools you need. Like, are you using a game engine you already know? Or are you making a game using a game engine you've heard about but you haven't used before? And if it is the latter, then you have to obviously learn a few of some of the basics so you're not, like, starting to learn during the game jam, because some people, are fine with that, but other people, that can be so stressful, and suddenly you're not really making a game as so much as wrangling with the game engine. And of course, scope is very important. You need to know what kind of game you're making and figure out if that is feasible within the time limit. It's a lot of planning. If you're making your first game jam, you need to be pretty clear of what you want to do, or else you're going to get overwhelmed and it's not going to be fun anymore, and it might mean that you never do a game jam again because your first experience was bad, and we're all conditioned to not want to, do something bad a second time in the hopes that it will be better.
I definitely agree with that.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
I mean, all I would add to that is just go to the Game Jam Discord and ask stupid questions. Go from there.
Yeah, definitely. After you've done all your planning, once you're in the game jam, definitely pace yourself, because, again, if you sprint through the game jam, you'll probably end up burning yourself out, and you will, again, feel like you're having a bad experience, because burnout is no joke. I, for the most part, managed to avoid it, which is kind of impressive, seeing, the amount of game jams that I've done, and the times I have done game jams concurrently with other game jams, or, in the tail end of a uni degree where I'm also making games. But that is also because of my scoping, so it's no fluke, really. But it's still wild to think about.
Yeah, that doesn't mean it's not impressive.
Yeah.
That probably means it's more impressive.
Yeah.
Alison, I remember talking to you at a live event, I think it was last year, and I asked you how many projects you were part of, and you said, I think 13. Wait, there's also this, and there's this.
Oh. Yeah, I was counting on my fingers and running out.
You were counting on your fingers, but ran out of hands very quickly. I was afraid you'd take your shoes off.
The thought of that gives me hives.
Sorry.
Starts counting on toes. It's like, okay, there was this game jam, there was this project.
To be fair, I think
Oof.
only like 1 or 2 of those were game jams, and the rest were longer projects. So I've only ever done 2 game jams at a time, and that is either Ace Jam and Global Game Jam, or it is Yuri Jam and Rainbow Jam, because Rainbow Jam changes like which weeks it is every year, and sometimes Yuri Jam is a bit earlier or a bit later, so they can clash. But like usually I only do 1 jam because it's basically taking 1 or 2 months out of my life and just dedicating to that one game, really.
Do you think it'd be worthwhile for Digital Diversity to start its own jam one day?
Why not?
Is there room? There's always room for more game jams,
Yeah.
right?
Always room.
As long as you don't do it in March, because during March everyone is doing NaNoWriMo, because Ren'Py is just the biggest engine that queer devs use, really.
Yeah, you don't have to tell me that 80% of the games I stream are written in Ren'Py.
Cries in Ren'Py dev. Oh,
Ren'Py goes brr, brr.
Yes.
really do.
Perfect.
With that, I think it's time for us to move on to our next segment. It's time for You Need to Play This, segment where we talk about games that we've liked, that we think might have been not represented, that might deserve a little more attention. So first up today, let's start with Maddie.
It's me. To be fully honest, I haven't had the time to play this game the whole way through, but the little bit I got to play of it was so extremely charming that it gets a mention for this podcast. It is called Cafe in the Clouds. It's a visual novel by Cafe Nemo, and they are just Cafe-Nemo at itch.io. And it's so adorable. It's a team of 3 people, and they made it for Nano this year. The art style is so cute and so stylized, and the whole like art direction of everything, the UI ties really well in. It's just beautiful, so cohesive. And what I got to play of the story was really cute, really engaging. And I hear there are puzzles, which is always great. So definitely highly recommended. That is Cafe in the Clouds. Go play it. I'm going to play it after we finish recording this.
My one this week, I'm going to cheat a little bit here. This is a game that I actually streamed recently. I was following a creator and I asked them which of their games they'd recommend. And this was actually one of their games. It's called Vivant Ludi. It is a point and click slice of life all about finishing a game on a deadline. So it's very, very in theme. It's all about essentially trying to live your life and finish a game up in 5 days. And you go through all these things like looking after your fish, and you have to feed yourself, and you have to clean yourself, and still working a game and socialize and make sure you get to bed on time and all this sort of stuff. It can get a little bit heavy with some of the stuff it talks about, because it's all about, there's interactions on social media, there's how you interact with other people, and the kind of responses that game devs get from their work. So, people who've worked really hard on something and then they put it out into the world, and, things aren't always nice. But it's this beautiful little game. It is made by Kaylin Sandel at Inurashi. So, and yeah, I recommend that one. It's super cool. How about you, Alison?
So I'm using this opportunity to highlight a game that one of my friends made for Rainbow Jam 2019, which is called Erasure. And I chose this because of the kind of people we are in this call right now, that being 3 people that are somewhere on the ace or aro spectrum, and also people with sexualities and genders that are generally erased in some way by the wider community and world. Erasure is a tabletop RPG that doesn't require a game master, and it is as much of a story that you want to read through as something you want to play. Because interestingly enough, I'm not entirely sure I want to ever play this game, and Jess Markham, the person who made it, she says that she doesn't even think it's fun, or it's not meant to be fun, really, because it is a game where all of the characters have a list of truths, And every scene, they have to tell one truth and two lies, and everyone else has to vote on which one they think is the truth. If everyone guesses the truth correctly, then that is a fundamental truth of that character. Everyone knows that it can't be erased. But if more people choose a lie, then that lie becomes a truth, quote unquote. So this is a game about people finding that because of reasons that, identity is being erased and changed, and they no longer feel safe with, presenting themselves how they'd want to be because of social norms and such. And it is just this heartbreaking game and experience that just like, oof.
Yeah,
Big mood.
that's some moods going on right there.
Mm.
And where can they find that?
It is at Angry Nerd Girl at itch.io. It is a free game, but all of the proceeds go to the Trevor Project.
And as always, we'll have all the links for these games down below. So, I think that is all we have time for today. Thank you so much, Alison, for joining us today. Let us know where people can find you.
I can be found on Twitter at Drazillion, and also just in various other Discords and stuff as Draz. I'm mostly on Twitter and Discord. Don't try and find me elsewhere, really.
Fantastic. Maddie?
That's me. I've been Maddie. You can find me at Time Patches pretty much everywhere on the internet. Most active on Twitter. And I have a list of all of the projects that I'm working on currently pinned on my Twitter profile. So you can hit that up and have a squiz.
Wonderful. And I, as always, have been Kaiju. You can find me on the Twitter at NBKaiju. You can find all of the interviews and blogs and everything from the Digital Diversity Project at nbkaiju.com. We have, of course, a Patreon if y'all want to help support the project. It is really appreciated. Yeah. Thank you, Alison. Thank you, Maddie. Thank you, everyone. This has been a fantastic little episode. Go out there, go join a game jam. If you've never made a game before, go and join one. Experiment, try something new, try something different. Just find some people to do one with you. It's a great way to meet people. It's a great way to learn more about yourself and the kind of things you'd want to do in this world. And yeah, highly recommend it. Until next time, this has been the Digital Diversity Podcast. So it's goodbye from me. It's goodbye from Maddie.
Bye.
And it's goodbye from Alison.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks for listening.